We are here, and I have the good fortune of being joined by the SVP of Customer Success from Ripple, the one and only Marcus Treacher. How are you, sir?
Good to be here, thank you.
It's a cold day in London, but you made it here in one piece.
Yes, through a snowstorm, but always good to meet you again, Simon.
It is always a pleasure. I think we had a lot of fun at the last Eurofinance conference quite recently. All right, so Ripple's put out a couple of strategy pieces recently that I thought was pretty interesting. One delved into XRP and one was the broader Ripple strategy. Let's start with the broader Ripple strategy, because this is a growing organization, what must be 300-400 people, maybe more now, kind of offices in every continent. Where's Ripple at in its evolution, do we think?
Ripple is up to about 200 people now at Ripple, but we are a global organization. We're opening offices around the world. And our strategy is, as it's always been from the outset, which is to create what we call the Internet of Value. And that's about establishing a network of payment services worldwide, working with our banks and with our customers, whereby value, money can move in the way that information moves over the internet today. So
it's about creating that protocol. And I think I often view what Ripple's doing as being kind of almost the more digital, less analog version of what was happening previously. So in the Swift world, it was like we were sending emails from one person to a second person to a third to a fourth, whereas now they're all on the same network. It's about bringing people onto this real-time kind of global network. And so there's a specific blog post around XRP and its role going forward. Do you have more detail on that specifically as well?
Yes, XRP is, as you know, a digital asset which was designed specifically for very, very high volume, very, very fast transacting.
By high volume, we mean, there's lots of transactions going through immediately, so we need the speed. We can't wait overnight or for 3 weeks for the thing.
Exactly. And actually, unlike many of the other assets out there in the world today, XRP is designed specifically for the use case of cross-border payments. And we think going forward in the future, that'll be increasingly much, much higher volume than today, tiny amounts, and people demanding transactions flowing very, very quickly.
So this is in contrast to in the Swift world, where in a best case, we're looking at really overnight in major currency flows and or major currency pairs. This is giving us kind of lower values as well, because actually if I'm going to do a Swift payment and I'm going to pay the $30, $40 for that, I probably need to be sending a certain amount to make that worth my while.
Yes, a very good point. Your point earlier around we being the digital equivalent of the analog Swift messaging, it's a very good way of thinking about what we're doing and moving into a much more interconnected, immediate, kind of internet mode of moving value. Now, interestingly, back to the XRP point, XRP is a digital asset created for the purposes of exchanging value very, very quickly. Within the Ripple world, in our vision, we use it for liquidity. So with a payment challenge, there are two things to get through. One is to move exchange value very, very quickly, and often with very tiny amounts, very high volume. And that's really the nature of the beast for payments cross-border, we think, in the 21st century. The other challenge is making sure the money is where it needs to be at the time a payment happens. And today we know that the world ties up around $23 trillion worth of value all over the world in accounts waiting for payments to move through those accounts. So if we can resolve that problem by applying XRP and applying an asset like XRP, it creates a very powerful win-win when you combine it to the immediate payment flow.
And is that because that asset exists on that ledger that everybody can see, so everybody knows where the money is and that can move quickly? So that value is known, it can be seen, but once it's settled, it's settled. So it's the digital version almost of cash. It can move around in that sense, versus the nostro vostro accounting, as it were, like the double buck entry that we used to have to deal with. So how does somebody benefit from that? Because I hear a lot of financial institutions talk about, well, the regulators don't really like digital assets, or there's a lot of concern and worry about the legitimacy of a thing that's not being issued by a central bank. I mean, where does that fit in the kind of the long-term story? Because you don't have to use XRP, do you, to use Ripple?
That's right. So again, Ripple is applied to the payment problem in two levels. One is the immediate transaction. And the product we've developed for that we call xCurrent. And that's all about using the interconnection protocol we've developed to exchange value quickly. That action doesn't need a digital asset. The second problem space is handling liquidity. And that's where, even though there are very good models we're working with today with the banks in the traditional world, we believe very strongly that as the marketplace develops into a much more interconnected world, there's an absolute powerful position for effective assets to be used in this way. And the key thing here is that you work with the regulators, with the establishment when you are bringing something new into market. So we work really closely with the world's leading regulators. The Bank of England ran a proof of concept, trialed Ripple last year, for example. And most of our corporate customers and global customers are banks, and many of the largest banks in the world. We did that on purpose because you have to work from the inside to evolve an industry. You can't work from the outside.
You can't be a threat to it, and you have to engage with those regulators. But it seems to me like the first thing people have understood is I can make payments better, and the second thing is now they're coming around to this asset. But it's definitely not, there's a journey there, right? It's not everybody's wanting the same thing immediately.
That's correct. And that, I think, really is one of our big successes. We've been able to solve the bigger problem in pieces. So a number of our customers are moving value very effectively, even though behind the Ripple transaction is classic fiat currency, where it's krona to dollar, Japanese yen to Thai baht, moving back and forth. There are companies which are also starting to pilot with us and work with us on the liquidity side. And, if we had bundled the whole thing together as a take or leave it from day one, you'd move much more slowly. This way, we can cater for banks and payment providers that have specific needs, and we can fine-tune our technology. We evolve very, very rapidly and very quickly, and that's how we evolve into a very comprehensive proposition.
So let's split this up even further as well, because there's the products Ripple offers to corporates and to financial institutions. There's the Ripple network itself, and then there's kind of XRP, the asset, which can be traded at trading venues like exchanges, and to get in and out of that. So the three of those, Ripple, the company that sells products, could potentially no longer exist, but the ledger itself and the asset could continue to exist. Have I understood that right?
That is correct.
So Ripple is aiming to benefit primarily through its workings with corporates and kind of financial institutions solving their problems, I think is the main aim of the company. But then can you see how people might become confused if it was the holder of a lot of XRP as well into that network? So I know it has a plan for how it's going to manage and release that. Could you give me some thoughts as A, have I understood that, and B, kind of if a financial institution was concerned about that, how would you allay those fears?
It's a very, very good assessment of Ripple's strategy and how we're constructed. So we are an innovation company focused on cross-border and improving cross-border. We believe the assets that we have created, XRP, is extremely well fine-tuned for that liquidity piece. But we use it as a commodity that's out there in the marketplace, which we feel is very, very effective to bring that liquidity element to the cross-border payment picture. And the way you've broken up the proposition set, I think, is spot on. So it's the bank-to-bank transaction flow, which we call xCurrent. It's the extension of that to the corporate world, which we call xVia. And it's the connection to that network into the liquidity world via XRP, which we call xRapid. Now, Ripple does own a large amount of XRP, and we have locked up the XRP we hold in a series of escrow accounts, which is important because we don't want to have our large holding to be seen as a potential threat or issue in terms of the value of the currency. So that's locked and controlled, and we also focus our work again on the end-to-end payment flow, and not so much the marketing of the currency. Absolutely.
I do think that there's a general perception and possibly misconception at the G20 level and amongst policymakers that the intent of these assets was to displace central banks and fiat currencies. would you say that Ripple has a different view on the long-term potential for crypto assets?
We do, yes. We've always worked from within the banking world. I think that's where we are rare, if not unique, in this whole kind of crypto digital space. So we believe firmly that change has to come from within, working with the existing incumbents, working with members of the existing world. We do believe, though, that as the Ripple technology takes hold, a number of smaller banks and regional banks would benefit much, much more from the ability to pay directly, and therefore we should create a much more open, multi-connected world. And that's good also for the underbanked, the underserved in the world today. And really, if you combine that with the ability to move very small amounts of money, very high volumes, you then start to get a feel for the degree to which we can unlock the world's payment systems for a much bigger community.
Well, because I think it's fair to say, Marcus, that the reality of how payments work at the regional level today is if I'm in South Korea and I've got Korean won, and if I'm dealing with my counterparty in Japan who's got yen, I may have to go via Citibank or JP Morgan in the US to actually complete that transaction, because the US dollar is potentially the kind of the major cryptocurrency, not cryptocurrency, the major fiat currency, sorry. That's crypto on the brain, that's used as kind of the bridge there, whereas XRP may get around that. But actually, does that make XRP potentially a threat to the US dollar, or does it just mean that those regional banks have a way to connect with each other in a simpler way? Like, can you see why people might have differing perspectives on it?
Yeah, I think a rising tide benefits every boat in the marina, and I can see that with by making it easier for individuals, people, startup companies, etc., to pay each other in a much more business-friendly, convenient way, inclusively, that generates much more volume, much more traffic, much more activity, which therefore benefits a whole range of assets, whether they be fiat currencies, whether they be other forms of holding, or the cryptocurrency we created, XRP. So I don't see XRP being a threat to existing fiat currencies. I see it being an unlocker of payment services, which today are actually quite painful to provide.
And so where do you think we're at in the journey of understanding and adoption of the various Ripple products? Because I think some have been more adopted than others, but as you say, I think XVIA is quite new, and I guess that's part of why these blog posts were released, to just kind of update people and share with that journey.
Yes, we've definitely led with the bank-to-bank transaction. Again, to the point earlier that we're working with the banks. We want to solve that problem first. For example, SEB released a press article last week where it talked about decreasing the time taken to move money from Sweden to the US from several hours to 2 seconds using Ripple, which is a great proving point in the market today. So we've led with the bank-to-bank, and we've been very successful in doing so. We've created our own global scheme, which we call RippleNet, with bank governance and control and rule books, and that kind of feels very, very good. We're following that very quickly with the extension to the corporate world, and again, bringing the ultimate users and beneficiaries of the banking flow into that direct connection. And at the same time, we're piloting with 5 organizations now, including Western Union, MoneyGram, on the third component, which is xRapid, and that connects into the XRP asset.
So it's definitely the sort of 3 horizons almost. You've got the sort of laying the groundwork, then the corporates, then actually the liquidity piece. So talk to me from a corporate's perspective. If I'm a big company, let's say I'm PepsiCo or I'm Royal Dutch Shell, or what problems do I have as the corporate treasurer there with liquidity, for instance?
Yeah, a couple of things. So first off, the corporate treasurer's ultimate role is to know where the funds are and ensure those funds are appropriate at the right level to enable the organization to do its work, but also keep it very efficient. And that requires a great deal of back and forth, information out, transactions in. And these organizations sometimes have many, many banks around the world. So you create a very difficult connection problem for corporations and their banks. Now, Swift kind of half addressed that with its Swift for Corporate proposition. Yeah. But that's slow, it's clunky, and to your point earlier, you have the delays built into that service. So Ripple is creating that that connection between corporates and banks, which moves immediate, very, very quickly, and also critically, because the banks can then take that transaction and forward that onto the banking network, with software releasing later on in the third quarter. It means you can send a transaction from a corporate treasury department or even from the buyer in a dock working for, let's say, a trading company. That transaction can flow into the banking world, cross-border, into clearing, as one connected transaction in the same way that internet information can move from my phone to your phone when I'm sending you on WhatsApp.
So one of the macro themes I talk about a lot on all of our podcasts and with clients of 11FS is we digitized paper processes and we keep throwing money at digitizing paper processes, whereas actually now we're moving into a world of truly digital end-to-end processes. So it's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. So talk to me, let's geek out for a little bit as payments nerds on like the SAPs, the Oracles, all of these ERPs, the software that the treasurer uses. What's your strategy for integrating in there? Is that kind of like you've got connectors, you have relationships with those organizations? What does that look like, the corporate treasurer's journey in their existing software stack?
Yes, I mean, to be effective with a corporate treasurer, you have to really connect into the software that they use, whether it's a Kyriba, whether it's a SunGuard, SAP, Oracle, etc. So the XVIA connection software is API driven. So the idea is that we can embed this technology within tried and tested ERP, as in like the SAPs of this world, or Treasury workstations, or any app that's developed by a software provider, let's say a PSD2 benefiting software provider or a bank, to serve the corporate treasurer. And that means that the day-to-day activity that they run through, the connections back and forth with the banking system, etc., that can all be driven through this embedded API connection very smoothly, very effectively. And
so the integrations with those kind of systems in corporate treasury can often be quite interesting, but the simpler you make it, hopefully the better from their perspective.
I think so. And also, with that thinking in mind, we developed XVIA from the outset to be hosted, which is another
so
very
it's intended
important
to sit on the client side.
Very important point. Or even on the cloud. So the idea is if you have Kyriba in the cloud or SAP's FSN network, for example, I'm just picking a few names out, the direction of travel for software provided to corporates large and small is to put them on the cloud.
But it'd be your own instance in a private cloud somewhere.
That's correct. So for the customer's experience, they'll be accessing the cloud software supporting their treasury, or let's say their finance function. Embedded in that cloud proposition is Ripple's delivery capability.
Makes a lot of sense. Marcus, what's happening next for Ripple and XRP? What should we look forward to?
Look forward to much more growth. You should see announcements for more connections, more corridors coming into play as we connect up more parts of the world. And also look for more pilots and also companies moving into production mode for the XRP flow, the XRapid flow. Excellent. So XRapid is moving much more quickly.
XRapid's moving XRapidly.
Which is fantastic, yeah. So we do expect to see some really good messages coming out about really all three of the areas that we are pushing. And ultimately, we should see these coming together. And we want to be briefing you, probably next time we get together, on banks who are moving funds through an XRapid connection, bank to bank, with a corporate at both ends.
2018 is the year of enterprise production from the sounds of it. Marcus Treacher, thank you very much for being on Blockchain Insider.
Thank you.
Alrighty, a big thank you to Marcus Treacher, Frank Muller, and of course my co-host Colin G. Platt, and the amazing production team here at 11FS, Laura Watkins, our producer, Michael Bailey, our editor, and assistant producer Petra, who's back in the room. I just feel great about this, Petra. I'm feeling pretty good.
Back in the saddle again.
He's back. He's finding tweets of the week. He's formatting show notes. He's doing all sorts. fucking guests, you name it. The man's a superstar. Alrighty, 11FS, the company that brings you this podcast. We're a challenger consultancy and agency who help you do stuff. So get in touch. You can hit up our website, 11fs.com, to find out more, or hello@11fs.com. Thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes. Those reviews help us so much. Spread the word. Tell all your friends and colleagues to listen too. We'll have more Blockchain Insider next week. But for now, goodbye.